Hello, today I'll be teaching how to draft a skirt sloper from scratch. I'll be using size 6 standard measurements. And for this particular avatar that we have here, this is just the FV1 avatar. My specs don't fit her. So to change the size of my avatar, first I'm going to go into the corresponding avatar folder, hit size. There's a Missy straight size folder. And then drag and drop our 6 directly into the 3D workspace. As you can see, she just adjusted. Now that we have our avatar adjusted, I'm going to be working just in the 2D window. So first things first, we're going to make the rectangle that is going to be both the front and back of our skirt sloper. To do this, you're going to use the rectangle tool, which is right here in the 2D workspace, or the hotkey is S. We are going to left click, put our width, which is our back and front hip arc measurements, plus ease. And that for me is 0.25. The height is the length of our skirt. For me, I'll be using 20 inches, then add 1 inch to whatever the skirt length is. So now that we have our rectangle, we're going to use the Add Point Split Line tool, which is X, or right here in the toolbar. We're going to right click. This is where you're going to mark where your back hip arc is. So mine is 0.875. You're obviously following your own specs for this. Hit OK. So now that we have our back and our front marked off, you're going to hit G, or the internal polygon and line tool. And we're going to drop a line down the middle of our pattern. If you hit shift while you're dragging, this will keep your line completely straight. And double click. So now that we have our line to actually mark the middle of our pattern, we are going to offset an internal line. So to do this, you're going to hit Z, which is your edit pattern tool. Select both parts of your top edge, right click and hit offset as internal line. We're offsetting 1 inch. This is where our waistline will be. Now that we have our waistline, we're going to right click again on this new line. We're going to offset again. This time you're going to offset your center front hip depth line. So where your side seam is going to end. Hit OK. So now that we have both of these lines, you're going to select both your center front and center back and right click and say add point to intersection. Basically what this does is it adds points to where the segments are, the lines that we just drew, which will help us drop our other measurements in as we go here. So now that we have our points set, we're going to stick with the Add Point Split Line tool, and we're going to mark our hip depth on the center back. So for me, this is 7.625. We're going to hit OK. So now that we have our hip depth marked, we're going to place our darts. So I'm going to start at the back first. Mark out your back waist arc line, plus the ease and whatever your full dart intake is. Okay, so now that we have our waist arc measured, we can go in and place the darts. So once again, we're going on this line and right clicking. Whatever your dart placement measurement is, mine is 3.125. Hit OK. Then we're going to do it again. My dart is 1 inch thick for an overall dart intake of 2 inches. So this is one dart. There's 1.25 inches in between my darts. And then one again. So now we have our 2 darts. One thing that we're going to do is click in the middle of these points and then hit uniform split. This will give us the center point of both of these darts, which we will need later. So now we are going to do the same thing for the front. we're going to measure out our front waist arc measurement plus the ease plus our dart intake. And hit OK. And now we're going to mark out our darts once again. So my dart is 3.125 inches from my center front. They are 0.625 inches wide with a 1.25 inch gap in between. So now that we have both of our darts measured out, we're going to once again go in the middle, right click, and hit this uniform split button to get our center points. So now that we have both of our darts, all of our darts measured out, now it's time to go in for the side seam curve. To do this, we're going to hit G or our internal polygon line tool and draw a straight line from our waist arc point to where the side seam is going to end on both sides. Now that we have both of these, we're going to go in with this edit curve point tool, which is V. You're going to click roughly in the middle of your line. You're going to left click, and then when you start to drag, click right. I'm going to move mine in 0.25 inches. I find that this is more accurate than randomly dragging around. This is a little bit more regimented and will give you an easier time trying to find your correct measurement. So now that we've offset it, we're going to hit OK. My target measurement is 7.875. As you can see here, this measures 7.871, which is great in terms of accuracy. So now I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. As you can see, this isn't quite so close. So what I can do is, with the same tool, just click your point and move it in a bit. And then this way, so now you can see it's close and our side seam curve still looks good. So now that we have our curves set, you have to adjust the waistline. On the front, it looks great. On the back, we have our hip depth point. So to create that new line, you're going to go back in with the internal line tool, G, draw a line to where the side seam begins. You're going to click and drag a bit so you can actually get a little bit of a curve. And then double click when your line is set. So now that our line is set, we are almost ready to extract our patterns. First, we have to transfer our dart points. With the same tool, we're just transferring the center point of our darts. So we're going to do what we did near the beginning, which is dropping a line down to this new line, just our center dart points. Then with our edit pattern tool, you're going to select this line, right click and say add point to intersection. So both of our dart points get transferred as actual segments onto our line. So now that we've done all of this, we can extract our patterns. To do this, we're going to use the trace tool. The hotkey is I for this. And to extract them, you're going to go around the edge of our pattern and hold shift the whole time when you're doing this. So once you have all your segments selected, you're going to right click and say trace as pattern. So this will pop out our new pattern piece. And then we're going to do this with the other side as well. Same thing. Once we have them all selected, right click and trace as pattern. Okay, so now that we have both of our pattern pieces extracted, I'm going to move this over to the side here. As you can see, we have a bunch of internal lines that we don't really want. So what we're going to do is first we can see that this dart actually didn't transfer, so no sweat. All we have to do is drop an internal line again, hit edit, and right click again, and then add point to intersection. That time it did transfer. So now we're going to hit A. We're going to select both of our pattern pieces and right click. Here you can see there's an option for lock pattern. Now our pattern outlines are locked, but these internal lines, as you can see, they're still active. You can drag and drop and delete them. Then right click again and say unlock all pattern outlines. So now I can click on these again. So now that we have our patterns extracted and cleaned up a bit, we are going to actually make our darts. To do this front, I'm going to delete these. I'm going to delete these points. Then I'm going to right click over this point and say add dart and put in my dart measurements. So for the front, my darts are 0.625 wide. As you can see, the arm width is adjusting accordingly, and 3.5 inches long. All right, so to do the second one, we're doing the same thing. 0.625 and 3.5 inches long. Hit OK. Now you can see that this is actually cut out of the pattern piece. Now we're going to do the back. We're going to go do the same thing. Right click, add dart, and input your dart information. All right, so now that we have our darts cut out, our patterns are actually done. So now we are able to arrange them and sew them. So now I'm going to show both the 2D and the 3D window. As you can see, our pattern pieces are now placed correctly. So to do this, we are going to move these over to the correct side. And I'm going to select one, hit Shift F to show our arrangement points. Alternatively, you can also go up to this menu and hit this button here. Then we're going to place our front and our back on our model. Now that we have these placed, we're going to duplicate. We're going to mirror paste. You can hit Control D to mirror paste and place our patterns. Now this will have symmetrical editing. So now that we have our pattern pieces pasted, we can sew them together. One thing you're going to want to do is clean up these curves here. As you can see, there are a bunch of points that we don't really need. To get rid of these, you're going to draw a marquee, right click, and say convert to curve point. That way these points still are there, but they're not editable in the same way anymore. And this will make it easier to sew. Similarly, I'm going to take these points, I'm actually going to get rid of them. So now that we have our pattern cleaned up even more, I'm going to take the segment sewing tool. The hotkey is N, or it's right here on the toolbar, and sew together my seams. So, as you can see, when we made the darts automatically are sewn together. So now that we have all of our seam lines, for this particular pattern, it's completely up to you. I am going to add a waistband onto my pattern. So to do this, you're going to hit Z or edit pattern tool. What I'm going to do is hold shift and click all of these segments. You can see next to my cursor there's a 13.753 measurement. This is all of those segments added together. So now we know that we can make our waistband whatever double that measurement is. So for me that's 27.506. So to make that, we're just making another rectangle. So S is the hotkey. I'm going to left click. We know 27.506 is our width, and then our height I'm making 2 inches, but that is up to you. I'm going to hit OK. now we have our waistband piece. So I'm going to move this down here. So now it's a matter of sewing this together. So first off, we're going to place this on an arrangement point. I want my seam to be in the back. So I'm placing it so my seam is in the back. If you don't do this, when you hit simulate, you're going to get some serious garment twisting, which may give you some issues. Now we don't need our arrangement points anymore, so I'm going to hit Shift F. So now to actually sew this, it's going to be easiest to use free sewing, which the hotkey for that is M, or you can hit it over here. First, I'm going to select the bottom edge of my waistband, then hit Shift and hold it, and I can select all of these segments, making sure that we don't select the darts. And I'm going all the way across the waistline. So now that I've selected all of them, I can let go of Shift. As you can see, now it's all sewn together. So now all of our segments are sewn, and we can hit space and simulate. As you can see, I've forgotten the side seam of my waistband. Luckily, it's easy to see when you make that type of mistake. So now we have our skirt pattern completely sewn up. If you'd like to know how to add fabric or texture, I have linked a tutorial in the bottom of the page, and you can follow that link to learn next steps. So that is it. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.